It is Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. in Switzerland. It is Space Café Webtalk time. Our Space Café Webtalk, 33 minutes with Aarti Holla-Maini, will begin soon. Thanks for joining us for our talk today about ESOA's role on global challenges such as equality, advocacy, thought leadership. As always, we appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback that is very valuable for us and help us to improve. I'm Torsten Kriening. I'm your host today and publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. We are a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcast. Some news: our latest Space Café podcast, episode 24, features Lynn Kaiser, and it was released this morning. So it's absolute worth to listen to his story as well. We also keep our fan shop open online for you to support us actively and become a space watcher. The edition 1 has cool items for you, your friends, and the ones you love. Your support is needed to keep our work alive. We do that for you. If you missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our website in the events section and on YouTube. We host our Space Café web talks live weekly, and this is already our 51st edition today. Today, I'm grateful that she made time for us in her super busy calendar. If I had to describe her with one word, it would be superwoman. But I'm not sure if that is politically correct, so I just leave it. But with that, a very warm welcome, Aarti Holla-Maini, one time in our Space Café.
Thank you.
Aarti is, or has been, the Secretary General of ESOA since 2004. And I'm pointing that out because we will come to this a bit later. She is a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Space Technology, Global 5G Coalition Network, and Essential Digital Infrastructure and Services Network. Under Aarti's leadership, ESOA and its members, CEOs, led the effort to showcase the benefits of satellite communication for more inclusive and secure society. Vital to bring the world's digital divide, archiving the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and realizing the 5G ecosystem. Aarti has 25 years of experience in the aerospace industry, starting at Daimler-Benz Aerospace, at that point of time, EADS, now Airbus in Germany. In 2000, she moved to Brussels, representing Airbus interests in the European satellite navigation program, Galileo. Aarti is of British Indian origin and holds British and Belgian nationalities. She lives in Brussels or holds master's and law degrees from France, New York City, Germany, and UK. Speaks multiple languages, but we will continue our discussion today in English. So happy to have you here today with us in our anniversary episode, Aarti. Let's kick that off. Talking today about global challenges, can you please set the scene for us? What is ESOA doing in brief, and who are your members?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me here to start with, and thank you for your very kind introduction. ESOA is the world's only CEO-driven satellite association. We have 22 satellite operators as our members. Some of them are global players, some of them are regional, and they operate satellites across all orbits. Last year we got Viasat, Astroscale, and MonacoSat as new members, and this year we have welcomed Telesat as our most recent member as well. We also have suppliers and other players from the ecosystem in our membership, and the association has existed since 2002. And the fact that we are CEO driven means that we are always results and output oriented, and we really take a strategic view of what impacts our membership and how we can support them.
Wow, that sounds absolutely fascinating. I mean, from what I know from ESOA, it's very little, but I know that you guys are very active on the Spectrum Difference and the World Radio Conferences, WRC later on, and those matters. So why is that important, and what does ESOA do there, what the satellite operators can't do or won't do?
Yeah, so our members, obviously, each of them have their experts who take care of the technical work, and they participate in study groups and also the regional groups around the world which prepare the WRCs. But what ESOA does is we support advocacy, let's say at a political level. So making sure that decision makers really appreciate to what extent their countries are relying on satellite for specific services and using specific bands. For example, the C-band. So when it comes to the C-band, we might mobilize our users like broadcasters or the humanitarian community to tell their stories. Or we might showcase the amount of investment that our members have made into specific systems, for example, for the Ka band. So the Ka band is comparatively new compared to the C-band. We don't yet have the critical mass of users. It's growing, but it's not there yet. And it's been targeted for 5G. So just to give you an example, what we did for WRC 19, we asked our members to give us Ka band case studies, where they were active in the world, which different countries, what they were doing. And we plotted those onto an interactive map that we had at our exhibition stands. So sometimes we would have ministers or regulators coming every day to the stand, and depending on which country they were from, we hope we had a case study there, and we would, they could click on it and they could say, wow, I didn't know that this was happening in my country. And you tell them a little story. Other examples were, we held quizzes. And one was on humanitarian, for example, and we asked regulators, which band does the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees not use in its day-to-day operations? Because everybody knew they used satellite, they didn't know what for or which bands. And, the regulators had to guess which one are they using and not using, and then we gave prizes. So this kind of creativity is what we as an association can bring. And it's really important to pass messages in a memorable way. But I think the most important thing, Torsten, that we did as ESOA was we were the driving force behind the Global Satellite Coalition, where we coordinated 7 satellite associations from around the world in order to arrive at common positions on the different agenda items. And that's really important because overall, the satellite sector is quite small. So it's very important that we amplify our voice and we be more than the sum of our individual parts.
And I thought the satellite operators is the tip of the iceberg, is the elite of the elite. But however, that might be coming together with my SES heritage that is still in there. However, one point you mentioned C-band, and we hear a lot in the news, and I know we have a number of non-technical people also in the room. So why does C-band so much matter these days?
C-band really matters because there is a really important number of users on all continents, especially equatorial and below, who are relying on it for vital communications, whether it's broadcasting, whether it's aviation safety, whether it's humanitarian or non-governmental organizations. I mean, there's the question that I always ask regulators is, before you think about allocating this frequency band for 5G, you have to ask yourself, what are the services it's enabling, and do you have an alternative? And normally, when it comes to C-band satellite services, there's no alternative to that because it's robust, because of the reach of satellite, and so on.
So what you're saying is that satellite operators, the C-band is a shared band between 5G and the satellite operators.
In some parts of the world, their decisions are being taken to open up parts of the C-band for terrestrial, for mobile operators to use for 5G, but it does remain an absolutely core satellite band.
Okay. We parked that for a moment because I think we will come back to that in a bit. So, but tell us a bit more about the ESOA structure. So what else does ESOA does, and yeah, what is the differentiator, or what makes difference for the sector? And I mean, how? I mean, what is so unique?
Mm-hmm. So we talked about our work with the ITU, but it's not just ITU-R, which deals with spectrum. There's a whole lot of other activities that ESOA is active in. Let me stay with the ITU for a second. So we talked about R for spectrum. There's also ITU-D, which is the development sector. And just like the WRC has a 4-year cycle, it's exactly the same in the development sector. But unlike R, which produces binding regulations for ITU member states, ITU-D produces guidelines and recommendations, for example, on last mile connectivity or broadband strategies for developing countries. And they produce reports and recommendations and guidelines, which member states look to and then follow the advice of. So even though this is soft advocacy, it's not as tangible and it's a lot less obvious than the spectrum work, it actually provides the platform through which to secure the political support for the spectrum messages. So we can't neglect it. But ITU-D is only one forum which is working on development issues. There are other high-level decision-making fora as well, and satellite needs to be represented in them as well. We try to do that as ESOA. A couple of examples. I participate in 2 UN roundtables supporting the United Nations Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation. And you mentioned earlier my role on the World Economic Forum groups. One is on essential digital infrastructure, and they have really focused on accelerating digital inclusion. And here it's worth noting that what we try to do is make sure that satellite is in. And typically when you start participating in these additional fora, there's no satellite, even though it's about digital divide, even though it's about development. And we know as a sector that that is front and central part of our role. Very often, most of those people have not heard of satellite. So we do see it as an inherent part of our job to turn that around and slowly and surely get back some of the territory and make sure that satellite is front and central. But it's also about 5G. So here's an area where we really try to provide thought leadership for the sector. I wanted to mention 3GPP, where the 5G standards are being set, because there ESOA is the so-called market representation partner for the satellite industry.
And EGPP stands for?
3GPP. It's the third generation partnership project. So it's where the 3G standards were born, then the 4G, and now they are setting the standards for 5G, the technical standards. So it's very much a technical fora.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that, because we use our abbreviations so widely and forget that people might lose us when we are speaking. So I just want to have that translated once. But you spoke about 5G, and as we are now on this, that's obviously a very important part or area of your work. I mean, the entire digital ecosystem at the moment is dominated these days by the term 5G. Or I think we will talk about 6G later on. But at the same time, concerns are always being raised about the latency and affordability, coverage, and so on and so forth. So in your view, in your work, is the satellite industry doing enough to secure its own role in this ecosystem? So, because I mean, your competitors for the same spectrum, I don't want to say enemies, these are giants.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
With established quite a long time ago, with deep pockets, and of course, they know each other. So now you come in.
Yeah, indeed. Well, so I think I would start by saying that the satellite sector always positions itself as one of a mix of technologies that is required to enable a complete and inclusive 5G ecosystem. And I think the satellite offering is so diverse. whether we're talking about bringing direct high-speed broadband to users, or access to satellite-powered community Wi-Fi, or satellite-powered mobile connectivity for isolated areas like backhaul, or connecting moving vehicles, or even enabling IoT applications like global asset tracking. You know, I could go on, but the point I'm making is that there are just so many different services and applications in the 5G context that require seamless connectivity. They require the reach of satellite to be inclusive and sometimes even to close the business case. And that's why when you listen to the European Commission, for example, you hear them say that 5G is a network of networks. And that is something which is supported also by the ITU and European administrations. But you're right, many telcos and mobile operators will still push 5G as just the next G, as if it were a standalone terrestrial network. And I think they do that for two reasons. One is to secure funding, and secondly is to secure spectrum. So terrestrial operators have really convinced regulators that if and only if they get more spectrum, will they be able to deliver on the promise of 5G, bridge the digital divide, and etc. And we do feel it's an essential part of our job to make sure that people understand that spectrum is only one part of the equation. You can give mobile operators all the spectrum in the world, and you will still see a digital divide. And in the future, a 5G divide, because bridging those gaps is not a question of spectrum. It's a question of economics.
I would like to pick one of the questions from Cheryl here and wave them in. Can you please speak briefly about the competitive issue around bandwidth assignments in orbit, and how does that then come together? Can you go there? In the light of 5G, if we talk about that.
Bandwidth assignment in orbit. I'm not sure what that means.
Frequency assignment, or spectrum assignment.
Yeah.
Orbital services, I would translate it.
Well, so
I think the point here is what is competing here, and I mean.
Oh, I see. Okay. So we have mobile operators are really going for the C-band in particular, mostly the downlink. But there's so that's one important one. Another one is the uplink, where we actually the uplink is satellite C-band uplink, but it's a competition between Wi-Fi and IMT, mobile terrestrial. So there you have a competition, but there's I think something like 19 agenda items for WRC 23, which concern the satellite industry in some form or other. But the important thing also is that it's not just in the WRC context. We see that mobile operators have really tried to bypass the ITU, try to act outside of WRC outcomes to lobby countries nationally, saying that, you know, you can ignore that. This is what's important for your country. So even though the WRC has said 28 gigahertz, the Ka band is not on the agenda, you should please allocate this anyway. You know, this kind of thing happens. So we have to be very active on all fronts, both within the ITU context, but also in terms of national and local lobbying.
You talk now about telcos and mobile operators, but I think there's this white room, the white elephant in the room, not an elephant in a white room, the white elephant in the room. The new cats on the block, so LEO constellations. So how do they fit into that? I mean, of course, they have to follow the rules as well, no doubt.
Yeah, totally. So I think the first thing we should mention is just about the work that's going on in 3GPP before we get to LEO, because I think that's a missing link that we haven't yet addressed. Right. So it's not just about the satellite industry saying, oh, satellite is part of 5G and coming up with a nice narrative. There's actually very solid technical work on standards which will be required for complete integration of satellite and terrestrial networks for the future, which is happening within 3GPP. So there I'm talking about new radio for non-terrestrial networks, which will allow direct access by satellites to terminals. non-terrestrial networks, IoT. And these two elements are going on in the radio access network working group of 3GPP. But then you also have the satellite access and 5G backhaul work, which is going on in a different working group of 3GPP called system architecture. And these items, which are to do with satellite integration, have been fully supported by NGMN, the Next Generation Mobile Network Operators Alliance. I'm mentioning that because I saw that there was a question on, is there a cooperation between satellite and the others? Yes, there is. So ESOA has an MOU with the Next Generation Mobile Network Operators Alliance, and they were really supportive and wanted to see this technical work happening. And that brings me to this question that you just asked about LEO constellations. I think that there's definitely a lot of anticipation and interest in LEO broadband systems. And I think there's two lines of thought behind that. First of all, MNOs are under a lot of pressure by governments to roll out 5G, but many of them are still monetizing their 3G and 4G investments. OTT is consuming their networks without contributing to the cost. Roaming charges, at least within the EU, have gone. So MNOs need a way to grow their revenues, grow their pie. And when they look at nearly 50% of the world population being unconnected, clearly therein lies the answer. But they know that alone they can't do it because it doesn't make economic sense to build base stations in rural areas to connect the unconnected. But at the same time, they see that satellite hasn't done it either. So I think that some MNOs are waiting for LEO broadband to be able to tap this market together with them. And they do see that the kind of speed and latency that LEO broadband systems will offer is comparable to terrestrial. So they see that as a natural fit. But other MNOs see that satellite and LEO broadband is a threat that will steal away this potential opportunity for growth, this potential market. So I think there's two sides. For ESOA, with all the evolution that our sector has done across all orbits and the drop in prices, we really think there's an opportunity for mobile operators to tap these new markets already now with existing systems and make use also of LEO when they are there for specific lower latency applications.
Okay. So, but do you think that your members, the satellite operators, are well positioned for the upcoming future? I mean, an upcoming future of our 10,000 or Starlink satellites or in space reaching every household, or as we in Germany would say, every cow on the field. So, I mean, is that a threat per se, or are your members relaxed? I mean, you're talking to the people that have to take the decision, and they can't close their eyes.
No,
like many politicians do at the moment.
So I mean, I can't comment too much on what the different companies envisage, but as far as I understand it, of course, Starlink is talking about direct user connectivity, but it's certainly not for, at the moment, it's certainly not for the poor man or for developing countries, right? It's a very much a different market. But I do think that there will be an important role to play for one or other of these LEO broadband systems, especially in backhauling and carrying a lot of data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. More on the personal side, I mean, I mentioned before that you're working since 2004 in ESOA, so which is obviously quite a significant time. So, 17 years means 4+ WRC cycles. So, doesn't it get repetitive? I mean, 2G, 3G, 4G, whatever comes down the road, yeah, just another number. It's like an operating system on your iOS, yeah, on your Mac. So, how do you stay motivated?
You know, the real question is, hasn't it aged you? And I would say, yes, it has. But
I would never ask such a question.
Yeah, no. So the industry is innovating so much that even though, yeah, it's been a long time, you're right. But though our work in the association needs to keep pace with what's happening in the markets, within our membership, and in the world more generally. And the world is a totally different place to where it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 15 years ago. So on the one hand, you can just look at the digital ecosystem. 5 years ago, nobody was talking about 5G, but today we're even talking about 6G. So within our membership, we need to start getting our heads around what's the satellite narrative around that? Is it just a narrative? Is there more than that? What does 6G even mean? How is satellite going to play into that? And there's also a very acute awareness of the vulnerabilities in the world today. I mean, just with COVID, we've seen how much emphasis has been placed on the differences between the haves and the have-nots with the digital divide, or the increase in natural disasters, or even the growth of IoT. Some of these things are really new. Others have been there for a long time, but now all of a sudden they're very prominent. So we work on all of these different things and we adapt as the world around us adapts. And for me, in practical terms, that means that the job reinvents itself every year and the learning curve really stays really, really steep. Especially like when I think of 3GPP, I'm having to get my head around technical stuff. I'm not a technical person. And so when you have to keep challenging yourself and the job keeps challenging you. And then when you're working for CEOs, that's always a challenge in the nicest possible way. What's really nice, Torsten, is we do improve. We get better at what we do every year. And we see that the association is increasingly recognized. And that means that we get invited to participate in more new fora. And so by doing so, we can make a greater difference for our members. Let me give you one example. I mentioned these UN roundtables. And whereas before it was just trying to convince people why satellite is good for bridging the digital divide, how we do things, what we do. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of helping to define metrics for what does meaningful connectivity actually mean. There's a temptation for regulators and policymakers to define minimum speeds, minimum latency requirements, but we are now having to look a lot closer at what are our members doing and ask much more refined questions to understand the real requirements. And it's incredible what can actually be achieved if you take a realistic view based on real use cases.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, what is all technology worth, or what is all theory worth if there are no use cases? But I'm picking up on your topic of all these new things that coming over us, and we have to adapt with that. And I would be very happy to take your time once more to get coached how to be able to keep up with that, because I'm struggling. So that's one reason that I'm just doing media now, and doing these wonderful interviews here. The last topic I would like to talk about is, as we mentioned in our title, is equality. And I know that's something that's very important, not just for you, for your organization, for all of us. You're a woman, and obviously a woman in what is arguably still a very male-dominated environment. And I mean, looking here down the list of our attendees, we have a number of, sorry guys, but old white men here are also asking wonderful questions. Martin, we come to those in a bit. So how relevant is it to have a gender balance in our sector? So, and where are we today?
Yeah, I think it is increasingly relevant and important. And I would probably give 3 reasons for that. The first one is that this is something that I have learned in the last 1 year, actually. And that is that I've learned that more gender diversity actually impacts the bottom line. So research shows that the more gender diverse teams that you have, the better the decision making, and up to 60% better results. That's according to Forbes. And even though I can give you a list of female colleagues that work in the space sector, from astronauts like Nicole Stott to Jennifer Manner, the global head of regulatory affairs at EchoStar Hughes, or even Simonetta De Pippo, my friend, the director of UN USA. I don't think we are yet a sector that truly feels any pressure to put women in leadership roles, and I do think that needs to change. There are some companies who are very conscious of this and who have really been proactive to ensure diversity, either on their boards or in their workforce. But I think we still have some way to go before the penny drops that the gender diversity actually impacts the bottom line. I was actually reading up just yesterday a report from McKinsey. They looked at, in 2017, they looked at some UK companies, and that they saw that for every 10% increase in gender diversity, the EBIT actually rose by 3.5%. And I think it's that kind of awareness, the awareness of this kind of metric that needs to increase until we have a culture that naturally embraces diversity. And I said there was 3 reasons. So the second one is, I think it's really important to create role models for future generations. We need to ensure that there are more women candidates that follow their passion and choose a career that they maybe only dream of because they think it's not realistic. And if more women do this, then they have a chance of getting involved and even excelling in a sector like ours. So I think it's very much about STEM and encouraging women and girls to have the confidence to go into this field if they want to. And finally, and this comes back to our work at ESOA, we are being increasingly called upon to put forward case studies of what is the satellite sector doing around gender mainstreaming. And we have a couple of examples, but I really wish we had more, because gender equality is not just a thing, it's part of the political agenda. It's even a sustainable development goal. And so as a sector, we need to show that we are proactively contributing to it. And we do. Our members are doing some great things, but there's always room for improvement. And I think at this stage, it still needs to be done consciously and by everybody in the sector, not just by satellite operators.
Absolutely. No, and SpaceWatch.Global and our platform, our global platform is very much open for that. I mean, if you like to do a call together to our readership or to tell us there or give us their use cases, not maybe from the ESOA members, but general in the sector, maybe that helps to, sometimes it just needs an example how it can be done from somewhere else. As you said, maybe it has nothing to do with the sector. Let's spend the last minutes with a few of the wonderful questions, and thanks for everyone who sends them in. And Martin, you're not old, of course not. Let me pick one of the questions you asked. So, thinking ITUD, do you think that a 4-year cycle is too slow when considering the pace of technology development surrounding 5G and beyond?
For ITUD, no, definitely not. So ITUD is the development sector which takes care of long-term challenges. I think the digital divide is a long-term challenge. So no, when you look at the reports of ITUD in the last cycle, you probably wouldn't have found reports that are talking about 5G. But this time, and the cycle is just coming to an end now, there's 5G, AI, artificial intelligence, all kinds of things all over these reports, when countries don't even yet have 2G or 3G or 4G. But this is part of, vendors, terrestrial vendors' advocacy. That's the way they work. They want to sell. They want to sell their equipment. But no, I don't think the cycle is too slow in ITUD. No. Okay.
So another one from Dominic, a short one. Do you see a potential conflict between existing GEO and new space LEO operators? I would say in terms of spectrum, I would add here.
In terms of spectrum, obviously we need to find solutions to avoid harmful interference and all of the coordination, and there are agenda items and ongoing work to resolve those. When it comes to technology, I think that many things are possible, so I don't see an issue there. But we always see conflicts in the satellite sector between GEO and GEO, between GEO and LEO, between different companies. And that's a corporate affair, so we don't get into that. But in terms of markets, no. I actually think that there are so many, I mean, even if you look at two GEO operators, of course they will have some services in common, be it broadcasting, be it government services. But when you look, even if you look at just broadcasting, you'll have one operator which is doing managed end-to-end services. You'll have another one which is embracing blended bonded cellular. You'll have, you know, there are different ways of doing all the things that we do. And I do think that the market as a global marketplace, with all of the different needs of countries and the different types of services that are to be provided, I think there is room for all. Is there room in space for all? That's a different question, but nobody asked me that, thank God.
I just was offering the last question from Martin, that he talked about the team of specialists he works with in the UK to allow 5G to coexist with C-band satellite services. Are you aware of anyone else who's dealing with the practical side of this growing problem?
With the practical side of it, no. However, I mean, there's a lot of work going on. This is where you see members being active more themselves and less through the associations. But something interesting has happened in South Africa lately, and I know Lyndon's on the call as well, so he can probably shed some more light on this. But we have broadcasters who are actually flagging lots of interference in the C-band to their signals, and the regulator has now placed a moratorium on the C-band licenses, so they're putting a stop on that for the moment until we find solutions to this. So it's good to see that once a decision has been taken, you know, when we go to WRC, one of the things that I always say to regulators is, you're stuck in this box for 4 weeks. You look at numbers and papers and you listen to everybody speaking in your ear. What about the real user? Where's he in all of this? You know, the real services, you take them away and you really affect people's lives. But it's good to see that things are happening on that side as well. So it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, that decisions are taken and things are wiped out. Yeah.
As we are sticking quite sharply, not really, but we try, to our 33 minutes, I'm afraid we have to come to an end. And even so, I would like to continue this wonderful conversation with you, but we will do it now on Clubhouse. But be assured that we are following spectrum topics, and the regulatory topics are in our upcoming Space Café Webtalks and in our magazine. And hey, just in a week from now, we will have Alexandre Vallée, but I come to him in a second. So we will start our Clubhouse launch in a few minutes. For those of you that like to join us and have the capacity to join us, that will be 4:45 CEST today, so in 5 minutes. So Yvette and Mia will welcome you there, and we will join as soon as we are off here. So on our next event, so we have now the week before the Easter break. That was our last event for the festive season now, and after Easter we will start next Tuesday with Alexandre Vallée of ITU. He is the head of space services at the ITU, and I have to find out really the box where he fits in, because I learned it from you, Aarti. Then on Thursday, the 8th of April, we have the next session of Mo Riba's Vox Populi with Kai-Uwe Schrogel as his guest, and Dr. Laura Greco, and a few more. And on Friday next week, we have the first Impulse 21 and conference on space outreach, and I'm super delighted to be the master of ceremony for this event that we are doing together with our friends from Powering Space and other outreach organizations. A week later, on the 13th, I have the pleasure to talk in my 33 minutes with Robert Feuerbach on the future of launchers. That is very interesting, I think, because if we can't get stuff into space, then it's stuck on Earth, obviously. A day later, on Wednesday, we have the second edition of Space Café Brazil. And then on Thursday, another summit. Where are we going? And we will talk, or Markus Peyer, our editor-in-chief, will talk with Peter Martinez, Ken Hodgkins, and Pascal Ehrenfreund about our future. All events are going to be online on Eventbrite soon, or they are already. As always, we would like to hear your feedback, so please check in with us on Twitter, on Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up for our daily or bi-weekly newsletters. And if you like to treat yourself with something special, become a Space Watcher today. Your support will help us. Take your credit card and visit our fan shop at shop.SpaceWatch.Global. And I know, but you also know, we all know, we need your support. Thank you very much for all your interest today, and thank you, Aarti, especially for this inspiring talk and being my guest, and thanks again to the entire team behind the scenes for doing their great job day by day, week by week. Again, I hope you all will stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks for joining us. I hope to see you next week. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media, and hope to hear a few of you in Clubhouse in a moment. And don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Torsten.
Thank you, Aarti. It was wonderful.
Thanks.